This Pitch Breakfast video is brought to you by Spangler and Agins.
So, good morning. My name is Michael Brooks. I am the founder and CEO of SightTech. What we do is bridge the gap between visually impaired and mobile technology. Does anyone here have a loved one, a friend, a family member who's visually impaired? Glaucoma, macular degeneration, RP. So, 2011, my father lost a significant amount of his vision, about 80%. Working with him, I realized that the assistive technology industry in general was definitely kind of letting us down. A lot of technology was antiquated and outdated. It was highly expensive, and it wasn't to par to what I felt it should be. So I sort of accidentally, out of necessity, started SightTech. So basically, from that point on, we've established ourselves as a cutting-edge, formidable solutions company. We focus on the iOS platform. We're not limited to that. It is just what has been readily accepted by the visually impaired community at this time. And ultimately, for us to compete with the larger members in this field, we are requesting $600,000 to move forward to really be able to disrupt the marketplace. So, about the visually impaired marketplace. Worldwide, about 7 million people go blind every year. In the US, there's approximately 20 million visually impaired, and due to baby boomers aging, diabetes, we anticipate that number is going to nearly double by 2020. And it costs, at the moment, about $4 billion annually to the US, and that's in technology, lost work, rehabilitation. So, first solution we came up with is called iSight. It is a digital handheld magnification and color enhancement tool. It does retail on the App Store for $29.99, and basically it does the exact same thing this device does that retails for about $800. So ultimately we are able to utilize the rear-facing camera and do color enhancements, magnification, to allow someone to quickly identify, say, read a label on their medicine, or check a receipt, after dinner. What we're trying to move forward is to actually replicate a device like this. We have a provisional patent on a stand, and the fundraising is going to go to be able to bring that stand to market at around a $200 cost point. So this is our forecast at the moment. We realize that if we receive funding to get the product to market, it's going to take about a year. So year one, we can actually start that this year. SightTech will do approximately $900 to $1 million in gross revenue this year, and gross sales. Once the products are in place, year 5, looking at close to $12 million annually. So how do we get to that $1 million, $900,000 mark that we're currently doing? So we are a VAR, so valued added reseller. We supply 11 VA hospitals with technology, as well as have a field service support team that goes into the home and workplace, does technology assessments based on needs. We supply the equipment and then do all the training, follow-up, technology repair as needed. If you really want to see detailed, there's a video that we've made at sightech.com/yst.html. Really goes over that aspect of the business. So their competition. couple large players in the field: HIMSS, Freedom Scientific, Enhanced Vision, and ABC. These companies all offer very similar products, products such as this, and there's really a very little differentiation between what they offer other than some bells and whistles. A higher def screen, it weighs a little bit less. To give you an idea, so our solution with an iPad and a stand retail about $800. So this device here is $2,200. All it does is magnify and color enhance. You can't get on the internet with it. You can't check your email. You can't make a phone call. The iPal is actually OCR. So you would put a document underneath there and it would read it back to you. That's all it does. It's $2,500. So we discussed the Ruby. This is the smaller version, so it's a little cheaper, but the nicer Ruby's about $900. And then finally the eBot Pro, which is an extended arm, retails for about $4,000, and you still need to purchase an iPad or a PC for it to operate correctly. So this is our stand. We do have a provisional patent on it, and ultimately what it enables us to do. So this would be an iPad, lightning charger cable, HDMI out. We have a periscope 90-degree lens. I actually have the prototype of it here, which would allow the rear-facing camera to face directly down. Ultimately, we have illumination underneath so we can control the lighting variables, and then HDMI out so you can hook it to any size monitor that would work for you. So a 20-inch all the way to something 60-inch plus. My team, it's myself, Philip Ross. We're iOS developers, iBook Publishing, bunch of Microsoft certifications, as well as also on staff I have a certified vision rehabilitation therapist and a certified orientation and mobility specialist. Moving forward, we don't need the 600 grand all up front. We do have a Gantt chart, a timeline, some different aspects in the business plan. Ideally, we'd like a little more, but we are willing to offer equity ownership at a $50,000 increment level. What's that going to allow us to do is to fully develop the vision stand prototype to manufactured specifications, patent all components, and then provide detailed cost analysis for manufacturing, marketing, and additional app development. Turnaround time, once $50,000, is about 120 days. So we are ready to rock and roll. Also, the initial investor will receive first right of refusal for any future investment opportunities. And this is us.
So Michael, very nice job.
Thank you.
I did like you did the summary statement right where you were bridging the gap for sight impaired and mobile. I like that. It was concise. I could get it. So that's excellent. I also like the story about your father because it made it personal. So you've got personal passion around that. That came forward as well. So that was very good. A couple of things that I found kind of just incredibly ironic, that your slide deck was an eye chart, right? Given what you're pitching. One of the things that it's really hard to get entrepreneurs to figure out, less is more. Okay. When it comes to an investor pitch, you need to have bullets up there. And you know this backwards and forwards, that was very clear. So you don't have to have it all on the slide. Make them, and it's really hard. I mean, taking your deck, it's probably a week's worth of work to take that and then figure out what are the relevant bullet points and make them bullet points on each slide. But that's what you should go, because you can talk to it and you can fill in detail, but you've got way too much in there. And if you had an investor who was sitting there looking at that deck, they'd sit there and they'd be reading it most of the time, right? Okay. You don't want that. You want to engage with them, and when there's too much on the slide deck, you can't engage them. I really like that you said, hey, I'm looking for $600,000. That was good, because it's very important for the investor to know how much you're looking for. Your uses of funds got kind of fuzzy. Okay. So you need to try to see if you can crisp that up, because I was a little lost as, were you really doing, I go back to your concise statement of you were bridging the gap for sight impaired and mobile, and then you started talking about a stand that's not mobile. So I think you have two products, right? You've got a mobile product
Yeah,
and then
so
a
ultimately
stand.
what's in the field is there are companies making assistive technology apps.
Right.
But there is environmental and end user variables that make those apps less successful.
Right.
What these devices do incredibly well is they can control the environment and limit end user. So we need to kind of take the idea of this and consolidate it with this.
Okay.
And honestly, the stand, a lot more portable than this. It's going to weigh about 7 pounds.
Right.
You can collapse it, put it in a book bag, a briefcase, etc.
So one of the most compelling things you said from an investor perspective is with their eyesight product, which I think is the mobile product, right? That was $29.99 versus something in the market that was going for $200, right? That's compelling because there's a big enough price differential there where you presumably you could make a market in that. And I do have a brother-in-law who uses one of those devices, and I think he paid a heck of a lot more than $199 for it, by the way. So clear up your when you talked about sales, right? You talked about the forecast for sales. You didn't, one of the first things investors are going to say, because you had on the eye chart that was your first slide, you had something in there about being in business since July of 2011.
Yes, sir.
If I read that correctly. And then that begs the question then of, okay, what are your sales to date? Where are you? Do you have these products? Are you in the market?
Yeah.
What does sales look like? You be very transparent with investors because they so that would have been useful to say, hey, to date my sales are this, and here's what I've done in the last 12 months, and then here's what I'm forecasting, because then they can get a good handle on does that then can you make that jump to what your ask is for 600. And by the way, when you're making an ask for money, so it's nice to know how much you're asking for, but it's also really nice for the investor to know what does that get them. Right, so you've got to do a pre-money, and it can be it can be as simple as 600,000 gets you 10, 20, 30, whatever percent the number is, and they can back into it, or just tell them the pre-money valuation is X. I'll quit and leave Dan some time for it to go on, but Dan.
Yeah, it's great. I agree with everything that Daniel said. I would say to you first, there's far more positives in your presentation than things I would critique. Let me start with that. I think you hit on competition, you hit on size of market, you hit on growth, you hit on why it's relevant to you, you hit on where you're going, you started talking about patent protection, all really good stuff to have in the presentation. I'm going to work backwards from your comment on investors. I've seen a lot of people not put when they're in a forum like this, put the valuation they ask for SEC regulation, so I'll give you a pass on not getting specific about valuation and all that stuff. But if you were really talking to investors in a private setting, you have to have that. I agree with that. The biggest thing that got me, so I like the fact that you talked about the money you needed up front. The biggest thing for me was on the app, I kept here thinking that I know other people have apps like this, $29. It felt, well, there's that good differential Daniel talked about. It seemed really easy to knock off. You just started hinting at the very end about how what you're doing in your app is different, better, not able to be replicated. That's got to be in your presentation. What I'm looking for as an investor is why are you unique and why somebody can't just come and knock you off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you need a little bit more meat on that. It was unclear to me what services you have in market now versus what services you are planning to do. So I think that can be clarified. One other small nit, the story about your father, different people have opinions about how you open presentations. I think that is really compelling. I think those should be the first words out of your mouth, right? This started for me 2 years ago with my father. And then you can talk about how it affects other people, because then you've emotionally grabbed people and gotten their attention. You did it pretty early, but I think doing it very first thing is the best. And I'm going to give you a couple nits on presentation, but it's worth knowing about. You, like I am, you're a wanderer, so it can be distracting. Things like even the microphone was an appendage that kind of went everywhere versus here, so you're not comfortable with the mic yet. And I kept thinking, oh my God, he's going to drop the mic. Oh my God, he's going to drop the mic, and I wasn't listening to what you were saying. So there's some calming of yourself you can do there. But I thought it was very, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one more thing? So you did your slide on the team, which, by the way, I really think is very important. And Bobby, if you're still in here, you need to elaborate more on team early, because most early stage investors, they care about the product, they care about all these other things. What they care about most is the team, right? And so you did and you did a good job describing yourself, but when you talked about your COO, it was kind of like an afterthought. Right, so I would get that team slide actually up earlier in the presentation, so that people can say, hey, it's not just it's just not me and my PowerPoint, right? There's actually a team that's been involved in working, and here's what they are bringing to the table.
All
stick it out to the audience.
What are the healthcare, insurance, and Medicare reimbursement factors?
So Medicaid and Medicare do not reimburse for technology associated with visual impaired. They will reimburse your doctor for eyeglasses, optometry visits, etc. But it is one of the things that Medicaid, Medicare just refuses to cover. So what these larger companies do actually is they go into your home, I call it a vacuum cleaner sales model, with a salesman, and they show you all the amazing bells and whistles, and then they finance it for you. It's very high pressure. It's very much, if it were to happen to your grandmother or mother or wife, you would be like, are you serious? Because it's very much, they're so expensive, and they put this pressure on you to buy it and sign, and we'll give it to you, and then we're just going to draft money out of your bank account.
For people that have diseases like macular degeneration and so on, they really can't do anything without these kinds of devices.
It is correct.
They as well are not reimbursable for those patients?
I'm sorry?
It's not reimbursable as well for those patients?
Nope. So we, I work with MAB, Metroline Association for the Blind. They were just in a test group to see if it could be Medicaid, Medicare covered, and basically the verdict was it's too expensive. It would be too big of a burden on the system.
So I have the mic back here. So if I had a crystal ball, I would guess that virtual reality and augmented reality will blow this market away. So that's what I'll be looking at is Oculus Rift, Microsoft HoloLens, Magic Leap, things like that, where a visually impaired person could just wear the headset and have reality enhanced for them. So yeah, so that's
yeah. I mean, it's great, and I think we're making incredible technology advances. But ultimately, we're still years away from that being real life application. The other drawback too is stigmatism. So I know when we got this originally from my father, it bothered him to carry this in a grocery store, to look at items on the thing. Now with you know, smartphones, people just assume he's texting someone or whatever the case may be. By having augmented glasses on and people walking around, there's still a huge stigmatism attached to it, and I don't know if they're ready for that yet.
What's your exit strategy?
So a couple different ideas. So once we disrupt the marketplace, I'm sure some of these larger companies would come after us. So you know, merger acquisition. Ultimately, we could, you know, if it gets big enough, we could IPO it. It really depends. Ultimately, it is a brand, so we're not exclusive to Apple. Apple just happens to be what's working at the moment. But if anyone else comes out with newer technology, we can ultimately make value with that, and therefore it becomes kind of this entity that we could actually make much larger.
How does the app, and without getting too into API and stuff like that, but how does the app differ from, let's say, just opening up the camera and zooming in and doing all of that?
So I know you can't probably see it right now, but so we can do color enhancements. Also, what differentiates our app as opposed to everyone else, we have no buttons on the screen. It's all gesture-based. So it makes very simple for the end user, especially if they're visually impaired and they have to hit a button on a screen to magnify. It's very difficult. So what we used is what was inherent in iOS. So gestures that, you know, and then ultimately we are, you know, can do 6 different color enhancements, which are the most common color enhancement scenarios commonly used.
But the magnification is essentially zooming in on the camera.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're using a lot of what's built into iOS and just qualifying it for the visually impaired.
What's the technology built off of?
I'm sorry?
What's your technology? How'd you build it?
Really just Xcode and different things like that, just iOS developer tools.
So I think a lot of people don't actually understand visual impairment.
Mm-hmm.
I think as an investor, to magnifying on your regular camera. I work at Winston-Salem Institute of the Blind.
Okay.
Quite a bit selling to them. They're a terrific organization that I probably have. But what I really learned through working with them, and I think you were trying to touch on, is that it's often not about the size of the print. It can be about color. It can be a lot about different things. And I think when you were trying to talk about color just now, I wasn't really understanding what you were saying. So really educate people briefly on what are the challenges of the visually impaired and how does your app differentiate that? Because a lot of us are sitting here thinking, well, I can magnify on my phone as it is. You know, I can get my text a lot larger, but I understand that what you're doing is a lot more complicated than that. I think you should briefly touch on that.
Okay.
Vic, can I do one thing while you're in between here? So one of the other go-to-market strategies that you might want to think about, I've seen this be very successful, since your app at the margin costs nothing for you, you should give it away and use that as the entry point to get them to actually buy your other devices.
So yeah, so that's kind of the scenario, one of the scenarios we're working with. So buy the stand, the app is free. And then we're also, so what else we want to do
I wanted to make sure you heard that. The app is free, therefore buy the stand. It goes that way, not the other way.
Yeah. And then also what we're going to do is OCR, optical camera recognition. So once we have a stable platform, it'll read it back to you. And then that will be, we're thinking about doing that as a in-app purchase. And then also, we can tie into things like Google Translate. So for non-language speaking, we can actually, you know, so if Spanish was your primary language and you had a document in English, we would actually be able to translate it for you as well. So now we're going visually impaired, now we're going schools with the same kind of platform, or businessmen off in Japan wanting to order off a menu, etc.
Sorry, real quick. So great presentation. Love it. It's cool. I just was wondering, do you have any medical professionals that have reviewed the product? Anybody take a look at it?
Yeah. So we developed a SBIR grant with Emory University, as well as a tenured professor from UCal Berkeley, both visually impaired, both PhD. And we're very tied into different organizations. So we get constant feedback from nonprofit and the VA hospital as well. We actually are able to sort of beta test at the Augusta Blind Rehabilitation Center. They don't like us to use that word, but we're actually able to go in there and work with veterans hands-on and get feedback on what works, what doesn't. So that becomes very beneficial. And then, you know, all the healthcare professionals that are there assisting as well are able to kind of give feedback as well.
Michael Brooks and SightTech, ladies and gentlemen.